So let's get started.
But hey, that's what this is all about, right? I mean, discovery, teamwork, adventure. Unless maybe you're just in it for the money.
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 Money?
Money.
I'm going to say money.
Cinderella story.
You want answers?
We're on a mission from God.
Inconceivable!
Take your sticking paws off me.
I'm afraid I can't do that.
Have fun storming the castle!
Hey everybody, welcome to Story Cauldron, finding the folktales, fables, and philosophies behind your favorite Hollywood films. I'm Bobby, the movie dude.
I'm Anthony, the philosophy guy.
And I'm Garrett, and I'm so excited to be here today.
And we are diving into Tolkien's Story Cauldron. In his essay on fairy stories, the great J.R.R. Tolkien talked about how all of the stories we tell come from this cultural soup where we throw our experiences and our history and our icons and images and mash them all up generation after generation. So when we tell stories, they're always depending on older tales. We're watching movies and talking about the stories behind these stories.
And today we're talking about an international team of thieves who see how many things they can blow up underwater. That's Disney's Atlantis.
Which is a movie that I think Garrett and I are competing to see who's more excited about this movie today.
That's so true.
So let's start with the movie itself.
All right, so Atlantis is about a young linguist named Milo Thatch, and he's given the opportunity to take the shepherd's journal that his grandfather helped find to go on a discovery with a crack crew to find the lost empire of Atlantis. After fighting the Leviathan and a swarm of fireflies that literally set fire to everything, they find a living civilization with a history and a power source that no one is expecting.
So this was one of those movies that was really popular when it first came out. I mean, like surprisingly popular. It never got the level of fame. It wasn't like a huge money maker, but I mean, Roger Ebert gave it almost a perfect score. I mean, it was. I mean, it's a movie I remember seeing in the theater. I don't know why I saw it in the theater, but I remember seeing it in the theater in, 2000? Is that when it came out? 2001?
2001, yeah.
2001. See, I was too little. I wouldn't have remembered it. But I do know, looking back at it, that it is Disney's first sci-fi action-adventure film, and they made sure that they didn't put any... one of the taglines is actually fewer songs, more explosions, because before this, Disney had been known for doing a lot of musicals and things of that nature.
And there's not any music in this movie. There's background music, but there's none of the characters break out into song at any point.
None of them want adventure in the great wide somewhere and enough to sing about it.
Right. So it's maybe that's one reason why it stuck with me, because it seemed a little more mature, because I was almost in high school when I saw this for the first time. And so I didn't need to deal with all those baby movies singing songs all over the place. I thought it was too cool for that. But this, man, they were firing guns and lighting bombs off and making jokes. I mean, this was an exciting movie.
So you saw it in the theater when it first came out.
Yeah.
Garrett, when did you first see it?
I don't know. I was definitely very little because it came out when I was about 4 or so. And so I remember Mom and Dad buying it for me, and I was one of those kids where if I really liked a movie, I'd watch it over and over and over and over.
And over and over and over.
And so this is one of those movies that I would just have on repeat all the time. I'm pretty sure I've worn down the VHS of it.
And it is a movie that the more you watch it, there's so much dialogue in it, and the dialogue is really clever and funny. There's lots of jokes, and it's a very quotable movie. So the more you watch it, the more you find yourself repeating it back. I mean, there's still lines that come to my head in conversation with people here and there. But it's not one of those movies. I think a lot of people are aware of it, but I don't know if there's a lot of people that, at least not that I've met. If I quote it, more often than not, I get weird looks because people don't get the joke.
What about you, Bob? Like, when did you first see it?
Well,
thoughts?
Yeah, they bought it for us, and then they also bought us a little computer game that was based on
Yes.
Atlantis.
Oh, that was a good game.
And so I just remember it was like puzzles and just like little Zelda-like type thing. Yeah.
Puzzle solving.
And I remember a similar thing for the PlayStation 1. We had one of those jam pack where it was the demo reel of all the different games, and it had Atlantis, the Lost Empire on there, where you got to be the different characters.
The PlayStation
so much fun.
1.
PlayStation 1, yeah.
The original.
Oh, so good. So good.
But yeah, we watched it a lot because it was always on in the background because Garrett was constantly watching it.
I was that child, if you hadn't guessed by now.
So it was one of those movies that I wasn't like slightly ashamed that I liked, because a lot of those Disney movies, when you're little, you're like, well, that's all girl stuff,
Oh, yeah.
This was exactly more explosions, and it was more. I felt like it's like, yeah, I like this one. Before that, one of my favorite movies was The Great Mouse Detective.
Oh, okay.
So I didn't like the princess movies.
Ooh, we should do an episode on The Great Mouse Detective. Keep in mind for the future.
Yeah. So anyway, that's reasons that I really liked it wasn't the normal Disney princess type movie. But yeah, and then it was really popular when it came out, but it just kind of seemed to have fallen off the map.
I don't know why.
In recent years.
If maybe it was, maybe because it didn't have a soundtrack with a lot of songs for kids to obsess over. There was no "Let It Go," no "How Far I'll Go," nothing like that for kids to repeat. Maybe that's one reason why, and maybe also because it is more violent. I mean, people actually die in this movie.
Yeah,
which is something that doesn't happen a lot. This movie was rated PG. It was the first PG animated Disney movie in over 20 years. You know what before Atlantis, you know what the last PG animated movie was?
I'm guessing our first episode.
Yeah, that's right. The Black Cauldron. Yeah. So that may also be why maybe parents hesitated to show it to some of their younger kids.
If you're listening to this and you have never seen Atlantis, do yourself a favor and go watch it.
Yeah, because we're about to spoil everything.
So what are the origins of this film? Question?
Yeah, let's start with the origins.
Oh, so good. Okay.
Well, when you hear the name Atlantis, what do you think of, first of all? Besides this movie.
Stargate.
Angry Gods.
Stargate. Angry Gods.
Well, the first time that outside of Atlantis, the Lost Empire, that I ever heard about it was on some show called, on Discovery Kids, and that was what they were saying was, there might have been a island of Atlantis where the gods got angry and plunged their island into the ocean.
Yeah. So the first recorded mention that we have of a place named Atlantis, the idea of a lost civilization, that is all over the place. All sorts of different myths and cultures are going to have some stories like that. But of a particular country or city named Atlantis first comes from Plato. Plato, the philosopher, who we've talked about on other podcasts, in his dialogues, the Timaeus and the Critias, but especially the Timaeus, he uses Atlantis as an example of the perfect kind of society. It's something that he talks about in several of his books about how countries should be run or how a civilization should operate. And he talks about Atlantis as the perfect civilization where everything was going well until it was destroyed. And yeah, the way that the story often goes is that the gods grew angry with Atlantis, and so they swept it away under the ocean. We don't actually know what Plato thought because his story cuts off. The book is not complete in our records of Plato's writings, so we don't know how Plato finished the story of Atlantis. But it's easy enough for us to fill in using other stories from other cultures of great floods and destructions and things like that. But according to Plato, he thought it was taking place 9,000 years before he lived. So we're talking roughly 11 to 12,000 years ago is when Plato would have dated Atlantis to.
Woof.
So it kind of like makes me think, was it a teaching tool, or was it like something that he made up, or was it an actual place?
Yeah, it's kind of unclear because for Plato, he was more than happy to use myths and legends as teaching tools without necessarily having to ascribe to their factuality. Like he was more than happy to just say, whether or not this really happened, I can still use it to prove my point because I'm more interested in this other point over here.
Yeah, more interested in the meat and potatoes of it than rather, if it exists.
Yeah. Just like how I'm more than happy to talk about Lord of the Rings, even though, obviously Sauron was never really
wasn't
walking around.
Yeah. So I mean, there's plenty of people that still believe that it's real, and there's other people that are, and there's other people that out there that are like, it's just one of those fictional places that show up in fictional writing. So, I don't know. I guess there's a lot of things that would point to both, and I guess we'll address some of those too.
See, I'm one of those people that I don't know if it existed or not, but it is one of those mysteries that I want to, I want Atlantis to be discovered before I die. It's one of those mysteries that I want answered.
So you think you lean more towards thinking it was real, that there really was a place called Atlantis, or
I'd like to think I do.
You like to okay. So why? What are some of the reasons why?
Well, it's just such a cool thought, that there was this lost continent or lost utopia that had such awesome. What's the word I'm looking for here? It was just such an advanced civilization, and to think that could have happened so long ago, and that all of these different things could have really existed. Mm-hmm. It makes me excited on the inside.
Okay. I mean, and there's said about whenever you see cultures agreeing on a story, or cultures telling some version of a story in different ways, it makes you wonder, how did all of these different cultures tell such a similar story if there wasn't really some seed of truth somewhere? I'm thinking about how in almost every world religion or ancient mythology, there's some kind of story of a massive flood that wipes out everybody except for one family. A lot of people are familiar with the story of Noah in Genesis, but whether you look in Greek mythology, whether you look in New World mythologies from people like the Aztecs or the Inca, you can find it in Chinese writings, you can find it in Babylonian writings.
The Epic of Gilgamesh.
Yeah, all over the place you find different stories about a massive flood that kills everybody except for one family. And the details change from person to or from culture to culture, but it's the kind of thing that seems deeply rooted in the human cultural memory. And the fact that there's a lot of stories of lost civilizations or lost cities might make people wonder, okay, what is the seed that's pushing this into all of these different stories? I don't know if that's the same thing as proof.
Yeah.
I don't know if I would count that as evidence for Atlantis being real, but
in my mind,
a lot of people wonder.
I feel like it's something that it would be so hard to come up with. But with that also being said, I'm not a philosopher. I probably wouldn't have been able to come up with any of that like Plato had.
Well, you definitely see in a ton of ancient lessons and texts and stuff that there was always the idea of the utopia, and it sounds like Plato considered Atlantis a utopia before it was swept off the earth.
Yeah. And a utopia, if you don't know the word, that comes from Thomas More's book called Utopia, which means good city, basically.
It's like utopos, right?
Or good place.
Yes.
Good place.
Yeah.
And a utopia is the place where everything's always good and happy and nothing bad ever happens. And for Thomas More and people like Francis Bacon and for Plato, they thought that if you had the right political structure and if everybody stuck to the rules, then you would live in a utopia and everybody would be happy and nothing would ever go wrong.
Yeah.
I am horribly skeptical that that's ever possible.
Yeah.
I mean, I like the idea, don't get me wrong. What did the Go-Go's say about heaven being a place on earth? But I just don't think it's going to happen.
Well,
Yeah.
and that's one of the things this movie really points out is that it was kind of like this perfect place until they started to get overeager and expand their empire and take over all these other places. And
Is that what they're doing? I mean,
and that's what was going on. And because of that, that's when the gods got angry and or jealous, depending on who you talk to in the film, and the city was swept away.
Yeah, well,
swept away.
The chief said that he tried to use that power source as a weapon, and it kind of backfired, right?
Yeah, it backfired.
so was it the gods that flooded the city, or was it the weapon backfiring on itself? Or is it kind of left ambiguous?
But the weapon protects them too and saves their civilization.
Right, but
Yeah.
when the civilization is first destroyed, I mean that opening scene, I always kind of took it that I mean they might talk about the gods coming and punishing them, but that's never really addressed again in the movie. Like this is not really a religious movie in that sense.
No.
And so I always thought of this as almost like the nuclear weapon going off in their own backyard because they were stupid and were juggling with it. So
And that's one of the things you kind of see at the beginning of the movie too, because they have like the little blurb from the In a Single Day and Night, that little thing at the beginning.
the narrator.
But when they're coming back to warn the city, the first thing that they shout is, "You fool, you've destroyed us all."
Oh yeah, right.
And so
right.
it just kind of gets your brain thinking, and you don't know exactly what happened.
You just see that like gigantic wall of water coming at the city,
And they're right in front of it trying to beat
all
it
the
there.
people that are like, well, sorry, you didn't make it into the bubble in time.
Yeah. Oh, how tragic though, right?
Yeah, that's sad because they're like knocking on it. They're like,
And the
get
little
through.
doll.
oh yeah,
So this is something that, I mean, this is one of the first accusations that a lot of people will bring against any kind of utopia idea, is that you are too prideful. Like, how do you think that you are going to be so good as to get it right? You know, that are you really so powerful, so strong, so whatever, that you're going to be able to create this perfect society? It's an easy step to make that this is what their downfall is.
Yeah.
And I think that's, I mean, there's plenty of different stories like that, going all the way back to some really old stories of a loss of innocence in any kind of place like Eden, like this Garden of Eden idea, where everything is good and happy. And
Until humans messed up.
Until humans mess it up, humans break it and get punished for whatever reason. Whatever the reason is, whatever the method is of breaking it, then punishment follows. And they're cast out or they're flooded.
yeah. And you see a ton of different examples of lost perfection and lost utopias throughout stories, all like just everywhere in history.
Yeah, it's not just confined to Greek culture. It's not just confined to the Bible. I mean, you've got places in Eastern stories like Shambhala, places of tales in the New World like Brazil, the island, not the country Brazil, but Brazil, and more, or lost cities like El Dorado, even.
Yeah,
Where
the City of Gold.
Where this great treasure.
Another Disney movie.
So this, I think, when you look at when you do any kind of comparative religious work, one thing that you see very frequently, I mean, I think one of the things that religion of any kind is designed to do is to try and explain something that's wrong. There's something wrong with the world. There's something wrong with humanity, and here's what the method is to fix it, or here's the story of how that's going to be fixed. And I think this idea of perfection that has been lost fits right into that. This is part of the problem.
Yeah.
And maybe for Plato or Thomas More or somebody like that, they thought, well, the way to fix that is to work really hard and to listen to the smart people. Because that's, especially Plato the philosopher, I'll give you one guess as to who he thought should be in charge of his perfect society. The philosophers. The best kind of kings would be the philosopher kings who were objectively better than everybody else. That's his method of fixing the problem with the world. It's just getting the right people in charge. And whether you think that's, whether it's people or the gods or God or something, whatever your fix is for the issue, well, that's where religions are going to differ.
Man, I wonder what he would think of us today.
What Plato would think?
Yeah.
Philosopher kings in charge? Yeah, I think Plato might have some tears to shed in a lot of different places around the world. Or he'd probably just get to say, I told you so a lot, actually.
Probably, yeah. But you see so many different things come into this story, especially with this Disney retelling. So you see they make references to other ancient civilizations and to some biblical things as well, such as the Leviathan, which is kind of safeguarding the entrance into Atlantis.
Yeah, so in the movie, what is the Leviathan?
It is a giant robot lobster-looking thing.
And it's self-propelled, right? It's not a ship. It's a robot, right?
It's a robot that is off the... I thought it was off the power source in Atlantis.
Yeah, but it doesn't have people driving it.
No.
Yeah, it's its own...
Oh, duh, Garrett.
It's like a Roomba.
I need to learn my vocabulary.
A gigantic Roomba, swimming Roomba of death. Yes.
It's better than the tentacle chop shop robots.
Exactly. But
we need to get those shirts made.
You do find references in the Bible to the Leviathan. Most famously, Job 41. It's not the only place where the Leviathan is mentioned.
Which they actually mention in the movie, is that it is in the book of Job.
In the book of Job, Job 41, verses 1 and 2 say, "Can you draw out Leviathan with a fish hook, or press down his tongue with a cord? Can you put a rope in his nose, or pierce his jaw with a hook?" As you read through the chapter, it talks about how this monster is huge. His scales are strong. Out of his nostrils, smoke goes forth as from a boiling pot and burning rushes. His breath kindles coals. The entire river Jordan flows through his mouth. I mean, this is a very potent image of a powerful beast. And in the book of Job, it's God speaking to Job, basically saying, this Leviathan thing is big and fearsome, but I created him, and so I'm even bigger and more fearsome and better. As great as you think Leviathan is, I'm even better because I'm God, so shut up. But the image of the Leviathan has certainly taken hold in culture. I mean, you hear that description. If I tell you, big monster, smoking nose, scales, powerful, I mean, what does that sound like to you?
Just a terrifying sea creature.
Terrifying sea creature, yeah. And that's what you see in Atlantis. I mean, I think it sounds like a dragon, too.
Oh, yeah, makes sense.
But,
yeah.
Or a few other things. But this is something that a lot of ancient mythologies have some kind of idea of giant serpents, whether under the ocean or not.
Such as the Kraken.
Yeah, the Kraken is going to be one of the more famous ones from Greek mythology. In Norse mythology, you've got the Midgard serpent, I'm going to butcher the name, but it's Jormungand, something like that. Jormungand.
Yeah, you're asking the wrong people.
I have no idea.
In India, there's a story of the Vrtra, which has one vowel in it, so I'm sure I'm not saying that right. But and if you go all the way back, probably some of the oldest stories have to do with the monster called Tiamat from Babylonian mythology. Tiamat is kind of the embodiment of chaos and uncertainty and fear that is defeated by a god or the gods or heroes like Gilgamesh. I mean, there's different stories about Tiamat, but even in the Bible, the idea of the Leviathan is frequently mentioned as this big, fearsome, monstrous uncertainty that maybe it's a literal monster. Sometimes in the Bible, it's clearly being used metaphorically, like to talk about uncertainty and fear.
Yeah.
But here we have it in Atlantis: The Lost Empire as a guardian robot, which is pretty fearsome. I mean, it destroys their submarine.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
They barely escape from it.
In fact, Milo, as they're rolling through, he's like, there are ships from every era down here. And so it's been busy.
Yeah, taking out ships left and right throughout the centuries.
Mm-hmm.
Where are they? I don't remember where they're sailing.
I don't remember either. I just know
Does it ever
that
say?
the Shepherd's Journal was in Iceland.
Not Ireland.
Not Ireland.
Because someone misread the runes. I'm trying to figure out where they actually begin the dive. But
I mean, a lot of stories of
specifically
Atlantis
said.
place it somewhere in the Mediterranean or beyond the Strait of Gibraltar. For Plato, what did he call it? He said
between the Pillars of Hercules.
Yeah, it was even beyond the
Beyond
Pillars
the
of
Pillars of
Hercules.
Hercules,
Yeah, which
that's right.
was, if I remember right, I think that was the Strait of Gibraltar. That place where Spain almost touches Africa.
Yeah.
So it was somewhere out in the Atlantic Ocean. I mean, that's often, I think, where you see maps of it, of this.
Yeah. Just, like,
lost continent.
west of Ireland?
Yeah, somewhere
around there.
Somewhere in between North America and Europe.
Yeah. Okay. That's a big...
There's a lot of space out there.
Big spot to...
I assume that they would have gone somewhere around there in the movie, but...
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think it's ever specifically mentioned where.
They meet this Leviathan.
And they narrowly escape, and that's where they lose a majority of their crew that they had.
Yeah, a lot of people died.
And they do kind of pay homage with that, with the bowl and the candle.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, that's right.
It was a helmet, wasn't it?
Scene.
Was it a helmet?
Yeah, I think it's a helmet with the candle in it.
Just
kind of setting it off. That was a nice moment. It's also kind of a rare moment. Disney movies, I don't think, often show little ceremonies like that look familiar to us.
Yeah.
Because that's a silent scene. Nobody speaks.
Well, that is, I think, until Margie says something along. Oh, not Margie. Excuse me. Wilhelmina. She's always talking to Margie. Throws her cigarette and says, "We're all gonna die."
Yeah, they get back into the comedic relief pretty quickly. But for a moment, at least, it is kind of solemn, almost that kind of heavy weight of a religious moment in the movie.
Yeah. Sea creatures. I mean, that's something that we are fascinated with, I think.
Oh yeah, I was obsessed with the Loch Ness monster when I was in the 4th grade.
Obsessed is a funny way to pronounce terrified.
Terrified.
Well, I just read all books on it and everything.
I'm not as terrified of the Loch Ness monster as I am terrified of the sea lice in Australia.
Oh, that guy's
chewing
feet.
off guys' ankles or whatever.
Yeah. Because that one's real.
There's evidence.
There's evidence of it. Yeah.
Yeah.
The Loch Ness monster is kind of funny in how benign it is. I mean, because it's always, you see pictures of the Loch Ness monster, or you see stuffed animals of it, and it's always cute. It's like the friendly dinosaur.
Aww.
You wouldn't find one of a Leviathan anywhere.
Right. I mean, the Leviathan is the embodiment of the culture's terror. I mean, you see in the Bible and elsewhere, this is kind of a common thing in ancient writings, that the sea is
a terrifying place.
Yeah, it's scary because you don't know. You have so little control over what happens to you. I mean, you're constantly fighting for control. I mean, people who are seafarers have all sorts of devices and have all sorts of equipment and knowledge to combat the chaos of the wind and the waves and the things that you have no control over. So
yeah, it's the unknown also.
And that's the Leviathan, is the unknown. It's terrifying. It's more like the Lovecraftian idea of Cthulhu, which is even just, I mean, I really enjoy reading H.P. Lovecraft, but I get even just think about some of those stories, like the Call of Cthulhu, it makes my spine tingle because it's creepy. This massive monster living under the ocean, sleeping until one day he shall awake and destroy the world. I mean, it's.
I don't trust it.
Well, I mean, even when you say, yeah, I know that's not real, but still, there's some part of maybe it's the ancient human in me still. It's kind of just terrified of that idea.
Well, I mean, it's unknown. It's like this big embodiment of darkness and destruction that we have no clue about because, it's people talk about it all the time. We know more about space than we know about what's at the bottom of our oceans.
Yeah.
Which is, it sounds like an exaggeration, but I don't think it is. I think you're right.
It's something I hear a lot, actually.
It's hard to, and maybe that's just because it's a lot easier to look up in the sky than it is to get in a submarine and go under the water.
Probably.
But still, it's a lot safer too.
Yeah.
I'm much more happy to stay in my backyard and look up.
That and we're not James Cameron.
Wow. Yeah, we can't all be James Cameron.
Well, I know that a lot of the inspiration for this film came from Jules Verne and Journey to the Center of the Earth and 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea.
Yeah, turning the Leviathan into a machine instead of a living creature is going to be very similar to the Nautilus in 20,000 Leagues. Have you read that?
I started and I never finished.
Okay. What do you know about?
Very little.
Okay.
Captain Nemo.
I do know a little bit more about Journey to the Center of the Earth because of the old movie that they have on Mystery Science MST3K. I can't ever get it.
Mystery Science Theater 3000.
Thank you. They had one of the old movies of that where they were discussing it and watching that, and you can see some of that come through in this movie of Atlantis where they've made it past the Leviathan and they're in sort of like this air pocket. And
that was a really bad rendition of that movie.
It was terrible. I know, but like some of the themes, like
the Earth movie,
some of the themes, like the change in temperature and weather, like how they're walking, and there's a whole section where they're walking through snow and ice, but they're underground, and just those little nods to the original stories of being in the middle of the earth.
I mean, Jules Verne was a visionary science fiction writer who tells these crazy stories about going to undiscovered places and finding crazy things. I mean, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea has people get shipwrecked. Well, not exactly shipwrecked. Get attacked by this pirate named Nemo, who is he's a fascinating character, but he's not in a ship. He's in a submarine, a massive submarine, which is more technologically advanced than anything else around. And it's called the Nautilus. And he is going around attacking ships because of he's got a lot of nationalistic gripes with the British Empire because he's he's a citizen of India, and he's really not happy about what Britain was doing to India. And so kind of like a violent version of Gandhi. But he's I say he's a fascinating character because he's very honorable. I mean, he's very friendly to the people inside, but then at the same time, really bloodthirsty and terrifying in his own way. But the Nautilus is going to look very similar to a lot of the ships that they're flying around and very technologically advanced. And then 20,000 Leagues, or not 20,000 Leagues, Journey to the Center of the Earth is, well, exactly what it sounds like. A team of people led by a strange book to go down in a volcano is actually what they do in that book.
Well, in Atlantis, they get trapped in a volcano.
They get trapped in a volcano by the end. Oh, that's right. That's true.
No, they get trapped in a volcano when they first go into Atlantis.
Right after the Fireflies.
Burn down their camp.
Yeah. And then at the end,
the Fireflies were actually at the bottom of the volcano also, because that's where they set up camp. And then they were going over this bridge to take them to Atlantis, and the bridge fell. And then they were like, "Oh, we're in the base of a volcano," and it was closed all the way up because magma.
Yep.
Right, and that's what they blow up at the end.
Yes, and that's why they have the what's it called? The big balloon with the propellers, and it goes vroom and goes up.
Yeah,
that's why they have that, so they can get out of the volcano.
Yeah.
So I remember the shot of the digger going through the big that giant digging machine that Mole loves to use, going through the there's this nice long sequence where it shows them going through the snow and going through all these different parts of the cavern. That you're right, it really does harken back to this kind of Jules Verne idea of a team of people going deeper and deeper into the unknown. We don't really have a lot of opportunities to do this in the real world anymore, do we?
No.
I mean, it's kind of unfortunate that it's so easy for us to just jump on Google Maps or something and get a picture of anywhere that we want to go. I think that's one of the things that I really like about these movies is that it still kind of gives you a chance to imagine going on an adventure like this. What are some of I think one of the really memorable parts about this movie is the diversity of the characters. All of the characters are unique and
very unique
and humorous in their own way. I mean, who do you think of, or who are the characters that you really like?
Well, I really like Kita and Milo because they're the protagonists, I feel, of the entire film. But I also just really love Wilhelmina and her cynicism and her snarkiness.
We're all gonna die.
Basically, and she's just chain smoking the entire time. And there's just something that I find so hilarious about that. And how there's explosions going off and she's all, no, Margie, I'll call you. No, don't worry about it. I'll call you.
No, this woman has seen some crazy stuff.
And she gives 0 Fs.
That's right.
But no, I think that each character that they have, they created such elaborate backstories for them, which is not something that you normally expect in a children's film.
Yeah, and they really went out of their way to be international with the
for sure.
characters.
Well, I, when you said like going really deep into the backstories, I thought about Sweets, and he's telling us about like how he learned stuff from like a medicine man and just crazy backstory.
Like his family was completely Native American, and then
his
one
father
day
was an army medic, and then
and then next thing you know, he's on a reservation healing people.
Yeah,
and
then he was out on the battlefield, like healing people there too, and then just bleh.
And then Vinny blew up a Chinese laundromat.
Oh yeah,
yeah. Well, and I love that his family, like, he wants to open up a flower shop.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he's this violent guy.
So nice.
It's really tender. And then there's Mole.
Well, I don't like Mole very much.
I love Mole.
Don't ask about Mole. You don't want to know.
Oh my gosh.
And Mole is your pet?
Close enough.
You have disturbed the dirt.
Oh my gosh. I really like Audrey, the Puerto Rican mechanic, and how she's the youngest character, and she's like, oh, well, my sister's a prize fighter, and she has a shot at the title next month, that sort of thing. She's just like, you know, not what you expect in seeing a sweet, young Puerto Rican.
Yeah, because she's only 16,
15, something like that.
Yeah. Then there's Cookie.
I like Cookie, but I feel like it's like one of those, he reminds me of a grandpa sort of way.
Yeah. Beans, bacon, whiskey, and lard.
Your 4 basic food groups. As he says that while holding up 3 fingers.
That's the line that I always quote when people are talking about being skinny. I always say, you're so skinny, you turn sideways, stick out your tongue, you look like a zipper. And nobody knows what I'm talking about.
Yeah, I love that. Like, it's... Oh, man. Yeah, I quote him, I think, more than anybody else. And...
What do you want for dinner? Yeah, beans, bacon, whiskey, and lard. That's all I need.
4 basic food groups right here.
But
it's the bacon grease from the entire trip.
You have these amazing, diverse characters, but then you also have Helga and Rourke, the two kind of... Well, spoilers, they're real antagonists of the entire film.
Who are still kind of diverse. I mean, she's German, right? Or Austrian or something like that?
I don't know, but...
I mean, he's American. But.
He's American, yeah. And I feel bad because I quote him quite a bit. I quote Rourke when I say things like, congratulations, you just won the solid gold QB doll.
That's right.
And different things like that. And it just, I don't know. I feel like they all come together in such a great way. Mm-hmm. And when that snaps, and Milo is like the only one that stands up for what is right, and then everybody else slowly starts to follow, and they're the only ones that are left. It's just kind of like, aw.
I do wish that there were more Atlantean characters involved.
I do too. I feel like there's only really the chief and Kita.
Yeah. That's basically it. I mean, there's plenty of other people on screen, but they don't really...
They're basically animated extras.
Yeah, they're extras.
And I guess you could also throw Kita's mother into that as well, but she's in there for like...
2 seconds of screen time?
I was going to say 38,
yeah.
But I have no idea.
Before she gets sucked up into the crystal.
Into the crystal, and I guess becomes the crystal?
Yeah, she lost herself into the crystal. She was... Like
she was chosen.
She was chosen, and it took too long to get her back out or something.
So she was lost to the crystal. Yeah. So.
Yeah.
But Milo, I think, when I saw this movie when I was a kid, I wanted to be Milo.
Me too.
That was all. He was the one of all the different characters. He was the one I identified with. He was smart. He was nerdy. He was not very strong, but he really tried hard all the same, and somehow he still gets the girl, and that's and becomes king of Atlantis or something by the end. I don't know. It's kind of
I feel like it would be more of a Duke level. No, I totally agree with that, and that's why I've been so jealous of you, Anthony, because when your hair grows out, you have close. Milo's hair, and you've got the glasses.
Oh, I should get round glasses like that. That'd be great.
It would be perfect. I would be even more jealous.
Cosplay.
But for me, I think the villains of this movie are portrayed really well, because everybody's kind of a villain at one point, except for Milo. And I mean, not the Atlanteans, but when you find out the big secret that the whole expedition has really just been a looting project rather than a research team, that they're just looking to steal stuff, that's when really see. I mean, there's that scene where they're all pulling their guns out. You know, when Milo and Kita come up out of the water and everybody's there with their weapons. Yeah, and you've got like full-on stormtroopers. With the gas masks covering their faces. I mean, it's really kind of disturbing to see these people that you identify with, Sweet and Mole and everybody so quickly because they're so likable, and then you see them turn.
Yeah,
and
I mean, it's even foreshadowed a little bit around the campsite, because he's trying to figure out, okay, the story just ends, like there's like a page missing. And he's like, we're gonna be here learning about making some great discoveries and all that. Aren't you guys excited? And he's like, more excited about the money. And like everybody's
in it for the money.
That they're in it for the money. So when we last watched it, I was like, I get it.
Yeah, there's like those little things that kind of show it off in the beginning, but you also know that there's like stuff going on, because there's the city that's crumbling, and all the Atlanteans are kind of like, throughout the movie, I feel, when you see them, some of them are happy, but then there's Kita and the chief, and they're both very much like, oh no, we're failing as a society, and
we're slowly dying.
Yeah. That's why even the chief is not. I wouldn't call him a villain, but
he's the reason that their civilization is crumbling.
Yeah, I mean, by trying to hide the crystal, and which I never really understood that. Like, did everybody else just forget about the crystal?
That's what I was wondering.
Well, it's been like 900 years.
Yeah, but nobody's died, right? I mean,
nobody's aged really. I mean, the aging process, I guess, so slow.
Yeah, I guess Kita's. She was 900 years old, something like that.
5 years old when the whole thing happened, and now she's a young woman.
Yeah. just barely.
So I was wondering, like, did everybody just forget how to read? Or
well, and that's the thing. Like, they go through it, and there must have not been any sort of like system for education or anything like that, because once the crystal was gone, everything went with it.
Maybe the crystal wiped everyone's minds.
Ooh.
Dun dun.
When you got a magic floating crystal, except for the chief, the magic floating crystal, you can get away with a lot of magic.
It's what the little zappers and Men in Black are made of.
Oh, that's right.
And I'm pretty sure that he does say he's hidden it so that its power can't do what it did again in taking his wife, because he knows that it'll take Kita next, because there's only 2 people left in the royal family, and it has to take someone from the royal
to protect
the city. Yeah. And so it would take Kita as the next in line.
Yeah,
and which it inevitably does. Yeah. But they get her back because Milo
saves the day.
Oh, Yeah.
And don't you just your heart soars in that scene, right? Where he's like, "Yeah, let's get on the." He jumps on that flying fish robot and then runs it backwards into the pyramid. But
Yeah.
But it's, I don't know. You can see where they're trying to keep things from getting worse, but also by keeping things from getting worse, they're not making anything better. It sort of just plateaus everything.
Yeah, it kind of reinforces this idea of utopias not really being functional. If you think about a utopia, well, no, let me back up. I think one of the things that people are always looking for, and one of the things that drives us, is that we're constantly looking to participate in the process of cultural creation. We want to try new things. We want new discoveries. We want new inventions. We want new stories, and that takes effort. And we're looking for progress in one way or another. The chief of Atlantis is intentionally trying to stagnate all of that progress. He's trying to just freeze everything in time, which, at least in theory, if you have a utopia, you don't want progress. You don't want things to change. If things are really actually perfect in your city or your culture, you don't want it to change because it's not going to get any better. You can't get better than perfect.
There's nowhere to go.
Except down.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to freeze his utopia before it gets any worse, and he's just compounding the problem. So I think that by the end of the movie, you see a much more vibrant Atlantis because it's more realistic. You've got new things, and you've got this revitalized project of participation, of everybody being involved. Everybody has access with these crystals again. Everybody is doing something to participate in the culture.
Well, it's kind of like this extreme version of isolationism.
Yeah.
We have in Atlantis, which it's not really working for them because they were such a progressive society, and then they just stopped it dead in its tracks with the disaster, the Great Flood type thing. So, but yeah, talking about that, you have these newcomers to Atlantis. And Rourke even says it himself. I like to see myself more as an adventure capitalist, and it's very, they're always looking for something to make money off of, something that they could, basically just to sell.
Yeah.
In fact, I think somebody said in the movie, we can't let him take it and sell it to the Kaiser or something like that.
Yeah, Milo
they
says
did say that.
Yeah.
He'll probably sell it to the Kaiser. Yeah, because this movie takes place in
1914,
right before World War I breaks out, or right as it's breaking out.
Yeah. Before the U.S. was involved. So.
Yeah.
And Rourke. Let's talk about Rourke for a bit.
I don't like him.
You're not supposed to like him.
He's the villain,
which is funny because he was named after a character in a different book that you are supposed to like, if you agree with Ayn Rand, which it's debatable whether you should or not. But Ayn Rand was a philosopher and a writer who lived, I just lost her dates off the top of my head. She's someone that you would read about in philosophy classes, in political science classes.
My English class.
Yeah, don't forget English class.
English class, yeah, if you have to read something like Anthem or The Fountainhead. You probably, God help you if you have to read Atlas Shrugged in English class, because that is a monstrous tome. But she lived in the, early, mid-20th century. And she's an odd duck. She had some strange ideas. And by strange, I mean ideas that not very many other people would agree with about what it means to be good, how you should live your life. She was immensely individualistic, and she actually developed an entire philosophy that she called objectivism. And this has elements of ethics involved in it, elements of politics, even has elements of metaphysics and what she thought the world really was. But she was intensely capitalistic. I mean, her idea of what you should do to live life properly was that you should live life for yourself. It's called egoism. And she actually thought that selfishness was a virtue, that you should not try to help other people unless it actually benefited yourself. So for her, in her book, The Fountainhead, she has her lead character is named Rourke. And she talked about him as the most perfect example of humanity that you could ever find. And as you read through the book, it's kind of a controversial book because Rourke has some dalliances with different female characters. There's actually a scene where he basically sexually assaults another woman, and by the end the woman is in love with him because he's the most perfect man who's ever lived. He's strong. Ugh. He's he is, what's the word? He's strong, he's self-involved, he is out to take care of himself and to make money. He runs his own business, and he makes a profit. And I think when Rourke in Atlantis talks about himself as an adventure capitalist, we should very easily think of Rourke in Ayn Rand as the adventure capitalist. For Ayn Rand, that's a good thing. For pretty much everyone else, that's a bad thing.
Well, thank you, Disney, for making Ayn Rand's character really shine the way he should have.
Yeah, I think it's in a roundabout sort of way. It is a really fair presentation of Ayn Rand's ideas that you should try to make money, that you should look out for number one. And it puts it in a kind of a real world context to show just how unsatisfying and ill-advised that turns out to be.
Yeah, well, especially since what's her name? The blonde
Helga,
yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. It's called the Zeppelin. She gets crushed by the Zeppelin.
When she's working with Rourke at the very end to try to get Kita, who's been absorbed by the crystal,
and is the crystal.
The crystal.
That's right. Yeah.
They're going up, and they're like, we have to drop weight. We have to drop weight. She starts throwing stuff over, and she says, "That's it, unless somebody wants to volunteer to go over." And he says, "Well, thanks for volunteering."
Ladies first, and throws her off.
Yeah.
Does he actually say ladies first? Mm-hmm. I forgot about that.
What a gentleman.
Oh, yeah.
And
that is
looking out for himself.
That's objectivism's rational self-interest. Ayn Rand would look at that and say, good for him. He gets to live. It's kind of a variation on
survival of the fittest.
Survival of the fittest, and Nietzsche's idea of the great man, that if you are objectively stronger, then you are objectively better, and you get to live.
Yeah, but there is definitely a consequence in Atlantis because she does not die right off the bat.
And she's able to shoot down the Zeppelin.
Yeah, she...
Helga gets her revenge.
Yeah.
Ooh, Helga's revenge. I like that.
And how... that's not what actually kills Rourke, though.
No.
It just slows him down long enough for Kita to basically... Well, it's not exactly
Milo
Kita, though, is it?
And the crystal?
Yeah, the glass that was kind of crystallized.
Yeah, Milo grabs that.
And then cuts Rourke's forearm with it, and he turns into like...
He transmortifies.
How...
Goes into 1 million pieces.
That was a
well,
pretty
he doesn't
scary
go into
moment.
1 million pieces because of that, because he's still like alive and he's like coming after Milo
screaming.
until
the propeller
like crushes him,
that's
and then he breaks into
right.
like a billion little teeny tiny pieces, and everyone's like, "Oh my gosh, what is happening?" And then the Zeppelin falls and makes a big enough bang that the volcano starts to erupt. Yeah. I've watched this movie too much.
Impossible.
Well, debatable.
That lava chase scene though, that was pretty epic.
It was epic. Oh, so good.
I imagine it made for a good level in the video game too.
Ooh, I don't remember
the lava
that,
in that video game. Don't even get me started.
We're talking about 2001 graphics.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it still bubbled, but it was
And it was nice to see everybody else in the cast come back around to Milo's side. And to help him.
That change of heart, so that because they realize, oh, this is we should be doing what is right and good, not in it for the money. Which they end up getting their money anyways. So.
Yeah,
Milo was the Jiminy Cricket for the crew.
Yeah, the conscience. He was the voice crying out in the wilderness about how you really need to just love each other.
Yeah.
The last will be first. The poor shall be made rich.
Okay, I
So-
really want to discuss how they made the film, how they made Atlantis, the alphabet, the language.
You mean like the design features?
Yeah, well, I think that they did a really good job of kind of taking this legend, mystery, fable, whatever you want to call it, of Atlantis and turning it into something tangible, if that makes sense. Because what they did was they took all these stylistic differences and they kind of turned Atlantis into this hodgepodge, I'm going to say, of these different ancient cultures around the world. So they had these different influences from the Aztec culture, the Mayan culture, ancient Greece, the civilizations that came off of ancient Greece. And they took all of these different stylistic, they took all of these different design elements and they put them together in a way that made it really a Tower of Babel sort of place. And the people that wrote this really had their stuff together because they made so many references to the Bible, to ancient Sumer. I don't know how to say it.
Yeah, Sumerian languages.
Yeah, Sumerian languages. And they just took all of these different influences and sort of made it into this civilization.
Yeah, it really taking a hold of the idea we were talking about earlier about how so many different mythologies from around the world have this same story and say, well, in Atlantis, the movie at least, it's because they're all referencing back to this one place.
Yeah, and how they took and made an Indo-European mother language. So they could have the basis dialects, I guess, of all of them in one.
Yeah, I love that scene where they first meet Kida, and she knows all these different languages, or at least can figure out all of these different languages, because the language that they speak in Atlantis is like the mother tongue that all of these other languages was born out of.
It's kind of like Latin to the Romance languages.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But even further back.
Oh, yeah.
And you immediately know this place is mysterious and wonderful.
And it's crazy. And I love how they basically created their own language out of it. They created their own alphabet out of the different runes. And if you go on the internet, you can actually find the Atlantean runic cryptogram. And it has the entire alphabet and all the different runes that they use. And
I'll find that for the show notes. Put a link in there.
They even made said that the way you read it is that you read the top line left to right, and then you read the second line right to left. So you're zigzagging down the page as you read. And I think that attention to detail and putting all of those different influences together really made it something that seems like it could have existed once upon a time.
Yeah, that's very Tolkien-esque, too. I mean, Tolkien was first and foremost a philologist or a linguist. He liked languages, and he liked to play with language and create his own languages. But for Tolkien, he really believed that a language was inextricable from its culture. That in order to make sense of a language, you needed to know something about the people and the culture that was speaking this language. And so when he created Middle-earth, he did that in order to create a backstory for the languages that he was just kind of playing around with creating as a hobby on the side. He wanted to create the Elvish language and the Dwarvish language and these different tongues. And so he needed cultures to speak them. And so he created Middle-earth. So for the creators of Atlantis, the Lost Empire, to make a language for their project, I mean, it's a wonderful bit of world building that really does give more weight to the story. And you feel like, and we talked about this before, you feel like there's a lot more going on outside the edges of this movie. That final shot of the film when the camera is panning back, and you see this. It's just this massive shot of the whole city, and there's stuff flying around all over the place. I mean, you can see there's a lot of other stories that could be told in this place. It feels, it's not a very long movie.
And if you have
but it
Netflix,
feels like
there is a short sequel.
Which was not very good. Oh. Yeah, that was supposed to be, I think it was supposed to be a TV show that didn't get picked up, and so they just took like the 3 episodes that they had made and shoved them together into a direct-to-video sequel.
Of course they did.
It was not very.
I don't know. I don't remember actually watching it. I probably did once, but I probably repressed it because I don't want things to ruin the first one for me.
Why mess with a good thing?
Exactly.
Yeah, it's. I don't even think they had the same voice actors. Which
It's hard to beat Michael J. Fox.
It's true.
And Leonard Nimoy.
Yeah.
Granted, he died.
Good point.
Would you? Disney is on this big kick right now of remaking their classic animated films with live action versions. Do you think this would work well with that?
Disney, hire me. I'll be Milo. I'll cut my hair.
I'd watch that. That'd be great.
That would be so cool just to even get to be a part of that, because since this is more of an action adventure one where I think so far all they've really done is Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast. Like,
it's true. They're talking about doing more
Jungle
action.
Book.
Jungle Book too. And
Yeah, they weave that
did they do
in.
Tarzan, or was that a different company?
Yeah, I don't think that was Disney.
But they are going to be doing. I just lost it. Never mind.
They're doing. They're planning on doing Mulan, which I'm sure
Yeah.
will be more action packed. I hope they better.
I hope so.
Battle scenes with that.
The Lion King? Was that what I
They're
heard?
planning on doing the Lion King and Aladdin. I imagine there could be some action in there. But you're right. This would be a different level
This would be
entirely.
a task.
I think it would work with the way that they're. I mean, if you watch something like Game of Thrones now, I mean, they can
That's true.
they can pull off some pretty amazing fantasy battle sequences, especially with the Disney machine behind it. I think this could work well.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Disney, hire me, like I said. Tweet at them, everyone, please. But no,
Hashtag Garrett for Milo.
Yes. 2 R's, 2 T's. I would really enjoy seeing it. I don't know. It's so cool.
Yeah, it really is.
I love this movie so much. I can't even.
So,
I can't.
Is there anything you would change about it?
Oh no.
Not even.
Well,
a little bit?
okay, that's a lie. Maybe I would like to see it longer with a little bit more description of the things that had happened in the past. I feel like they could have gone even farther in describing Atlantis and the language.
Yeah.
But that would be the only thing, because I just want more.
Yeah, more about Atlantis. I think you're right about that. That would have made it stronger.
Oh yeah.
Maybe a little bit more with the chief before he dies.
Before he kicks it. Yeah.
Yeah.
I would have liked more. What's the guy who funds it?
Whitmore.
Yeah.
I would
have liked more Whitmore. That guy's hilarious.
He's awesome. You want to do some yoga with me?
And then the robe.
I know, and I would love to see John Mahoney actually do that in real life. But I think they really emphasized Milo and his team. If they could emphasize the Atlanteans even more, that would make for a better movie. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
So,
What about you? Would you change anything?
Well, I would like to see more of the Atlantis, like backstory. But also, I would love to see Kita do more cool things. She's capable.
That's true.
But then, the crystal just kind of makes her helpless for the rest of the movie.
that's true. She does get literally.
And, it's a good moment for Milo to rise up and, show what he's capable of. But I would like to see a little more like awesome, cool. I would just like to see more Kita
More of
whooping butt.
Yeah,
Princess Kidagakash.
Schnagadaga?
I've been practicing on how to say her first name.
Yeah,
I can't say her last name still.
She's more of a damsel in distress in this movie.
Yeah,
than she really
but
deserves
she's
to be.
capable of a lot more.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah.
It's true.
But yeah, recommendations?
Everyone. Everybody watch it.
I
Even
think
if you've seen
it's
it
a
before,
really
watch
good-
it again.
If you're a Disney fan, I think that you need to check this one out if you haven't yet, just because it shows a little more range.
Yeah, I think really small kids might get scared by some of the parts with the Leviathan maybe, but still,
They'll be fine.
It's not that bad. I mean, I think it might be good to scare them a little bit here, because it's very quickly lightened up They don't dwell on it, and they never scare just for the sake of scaring in this movie.
That's true.
That would be. I think they should do more with that. The submarine.
Oh,
the submarine's only in the movie for like 4 minutes before it gets blown up. So I think if they could have done more, with the sub.
Couple of those 4 minutes are just as a tiny model.
Yeah. that would have been nice to see more of that. But yeah, that I think this is a movie for everyone. It's got humor. It's got a lot of action. It's got some good lessons to learn too about the value of working together and of putting other people ahead of yourself.
It's so good.
It really is. I mean, it's one of my top movies. So
it is a great one. But I think that brings us to the very end of the episode.
Aw, so soon?
So soon, I'm sorry. Thanks for joining us today on the Story Cauldron, and the music for this episode is from the band Hook Sounds.
Find us on Instagram at The Story Cauldron, or on Twitter at Story Cauldron, and leave us a review on iTunes. Let us know what you think, what you'd like to hear us talk about, what funny names you'd like us to mispronounce.
And we do have a Facebook as well, so try to find us on there as well.
You can find silly pictures of us recording these podcasts.
Yes, you can.
And more.
Absolutely. Support us any way that you can. It keeps us exploring these new tales. And I hope you enjoyed our breakdown of Disney's Atlantis. And until next time,
bye.